My younger sister Stella has been leaning on the same crutch since her early 20s. Because she can't have her one true love, she believes she has the right to demolish everyone else's happiness. I don't mean this in a quirky, she's just not over her ex way. I mean that if she sees you happy, she will systematically find a way to make you miserable, all while blaming her tragic love story. This one true love is a guy named Leo, whom she met at a college party 5 years ago. They hooked up once. He never called her again. Somehow, this single event became the origin story for her villainy. It began with her best friend since kindergarten, Hannah. One weekend, Stella stayed at Hannah's apartment. By Monday, Hannah's long-term boyfriend was sending Stella good morning texts. When Hannah discovered them together in her own bed, Stella's tearful defense was, "You just don't know what it's like to lose your soulmate." Hannah, understandably, never spoke to her again. Next was our cousin's engagement party. Stella arrived in a dress that cost a fortune, got tipsy on champagne, and cornered the groom in the men's bathroom. His account later was, she kept insisting I reminded her of someone important from her past. Thankfully, he pushed her away and immediately told his fiancé. Stella's reaction? She wailed to her parents that seeing happy couples triggered her trauma. My mother promptly booked her a wellness retreat to heal. By the time I met Mark, I knew the protocol. I kept him far away from family gatherings, removed Stella from my social media, and explained to him that my sister was going through a hard time and needed her space. For 3 years, it was working. We got engaged last fall, planning a small, intimate ceremony with just our closest friends. My mistake was mentioning it at my dad's birthday dinner. Stella's eyes lit up. "I'm so incredibly happy for you," she cooed while hugging me. "When do I finally get to meet him?" A week later, Mark showed me his phone, amused. "Your sister tracked me down online. Look at these messages." We laughed at her transparent and desperate attempts to get his attention, and he blocked the account she was using. Then, a month before our wedding, I came down with a nasty flu. Mark was supposed to be away on a golf trip with his brother for the day. That afternoon, a friend who lives near Stella's building texted me. "Hey, weird question, but is Mark's Audi parked in your sister's visitor lot?" A block of ice formed in my chest. I drove over, fever be damned, and used the spare key Stella gave me for emergencies. I found them on her sofa. Her head was in his lap, his hand stroking her hair. They were both half-dressed. She looked up at me, fake tears already welling in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "He just reminds me so much of Leo." I left without a word. Mark didn't even try to follow or save what we had. In that moment, I decided she was finally going to learn what it truly felt like to lose. You see, Leo wasn't some mythical figure. We had followed each other on social media for years, through mutual college friends, occasionally liking each other's posts but never speaking. He lived a few hours away, worked as an architect, and his page was filled with pictures of his goofy Labrador. I slid into his DMs with a direct message. "Hey, this is random, but my sister had a brief obsession with you in college and just blew up my engagement. Interested in helping me blow up her fantasy world?" He responded in under an hour. "Stella? The girl who showed up at my mother's house? Absolutely, I'm in." It turned out that Stella had once driven to his hometown, introduced herself to Leo's mother as an old family friend, and spun a tale about how Leo was the love of her life, tragically separated by fate. His kind mother had believed her, invited her for tea, and they had even taken photos together, which Stella posted with the caption, "Catching up with my future mother-in-law." Leo sent me the screenshots, including a recording of his mom saying, "She just seems so genuine, honey. I hope I didn't cause any trouble." I knew then that Stella was relentless. She didn't understand love, only possession. Anything she couldn't have, she had to destroy. But she made 2 critical miscalculations. She assumed I would just roll over like I always had, and she had no idea Leo was willing to play her game. We planned it perfectly. He would come to visit the weekend of a family get-together. I hadn't spoken to Stella since the incident, but I knew she would be there. It was a family tradition, and she would never miss a chance to perform for an audience. I would arrive with Leo on my arm, looking deliriously happy. That Friday, I picked Leo up from the train station. He was even more handsome in person, charming, witty, and with a gentle confidence that was utterly immune to manipulation. In the car, we went over our story. On Saturday afternoon, we walked into my parents' house. I was in a new dress, heels, with a radiant smile. Leo held my hand as if we'd been together for years. Stella was in the living room, holding court with our relatives. When she saw us, her laughter caught in her throat. "Everyone," I announced cheerfully, "I'd like you to meet Leo." The name struck her like a physical blow. She paled, then flushed, forcing a brittle smile. "Leo?" she managed, her laugh strained. "Wow, small world." He gave her a polite, distant smile. "Hi, Stella. It's good to see you again." That single, casual sentence shattered her composure. She mumbled something incoherent, but I was already guiding him to the sofa, taking pictures and posting them online. Every smile, every shared glance was a knife to her ego. Throughout the meal, she desperately tried to engage him, to bring up some shared memory that never existed. Leo, however, only had eyes for me, calling me love and keeping his arm draped around my chair. With every gesture, Stella's lips thinned as if she were swallowing poison. After the cake, she fled to the bathroom. I followed and knocked until she opened the door. Her makeup was a mess. "What do you want?" she snapped. "Just checking on you," I said with faux sweetness. "It must be so difficult seeing your soulmate on your sister's arm. You're only doing this to hurt me. And you only slept with my fiancé because you couldn't bear to see me happy." "No, Stella, this isn't cruelty, this is balance." "He was mine!" she shrieked, hitting the wall. "I saw him first!" "You saw him once, Stella. He never wanted you. You built a fairy tale in your head and used it as a license to be awful. Now you get to watch him love me." Because unlike you, I didn't have to stalk his mother or lie to get his attention. She crumpled to the floor in a heap of sobs. My mother knocked, asking if we were okay. I opened the door, stepped over my sister, and walked out with my head held high. Back in the living room, I sat beside Leo. He kissed my forehead. "She's going to spiral," he whispered. "You ready?" I smiled. More than ever. The fallout was immediate. The next morning, my mother called, pleading for me to show some compassion. She said Stella had been crying all night, that she was fragile, and that I shouldn't have provoked her. "Provoked her?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "I showed up with my partner at a family function. Is my happiness a provocation now? Or is it just that Stella can't function unless she's the center of everyone's universe?" She sighed that long, suffering sigh she always used when I was the problem. "Honey, you know your sister. She has a very sensitive heart." "Sensitive?" I cut her off. "She slept with my fiancé a month before my wedding, and you're worried about her feelings?" I was home alone with the flu, and she was on her couch with him, fantasizing about Leo. "You don't get to spin this? Let's just talk about this another time," she said, and hung up. It was then I fully accepted that no one in my family was in my corner. They had always handled Stella like a delicate, priceless vase, conveniently forgetting that she was covered in spikes. That Monday, Leo was still in town, so I took him to brunch with my closest friends, the ones who had a front row seat to Stella's antics for years. He was an absolute hit, charming, attentive, and completely focused on me. My friends exchanged looks of pure delight. One of them whispered, "This is the most beautiful revenge I've ever seen." The real fireworks started that afternoon. Leo posted a photo of us on his Instagram, a simple shot of us laughing in a park. The caption read, "Sometimes the best things happen when you're least expecting them." The comments were initially tame, a few friends, some heart emojis. Then, Stella appeared. Her comment read, "This is vile. You know exactly what you're doing." Leo simply liked her comment and replied with surgical precision. "We met once, 5 years ago. Following me and lying to my mother isn't love, Stella, it's obsession." That one comment detonated our social circle. People who had heard Stella's tragic love story for years began chiming in. Finally, someone said it. "I always thought her stories about him were a lot." Karma is real. She went silent online, but unleashed a barrage of tearful, screaming voice notes to my phone, demanding to know how I could be so cruel. One of them ended with the line, "You're ruining my life just for revenge." I texted back a single sentence. "No, I'm just showing you how to rebuild after someone tries to ruin yours. A lesson you never had to learn." Then I blocked her number. Of course, she couldn't let it go. A few days later, she posted a new picture, a carefully staged selfie of her tear-stained face in dim lighting. The caption, "It's a special kind of pain to watch your own sister steal the man you love, laugh at your suffering, and be praised for it. I'm not perfect, but no one deserves this." It got hundreds of likes, sympathetic comments poured in. A few of our own family members shared it. That was the last straw. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house. My mother opened the door, looking shocked. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here to end this." I walked past her into the living room where my dad was reading. Stella came down the stairs in sweatpants, her face a mask of tragic victimhood. "Is everything okay?" she asked softly. "No, nothing is okay," I said, standing in the middle of the room. "I am done with you manipulating this entire family and playing the martyr." I looked at my parents. "Did you see her post? Do you really believe that's the truth? Have you forgotten who destroyed whose wedding?" "Honey, this isn't the way to handle this," my mother began. "It's the only way," I said, turning back to Stella. "You seduced my fiancé. You betrayed me in the worst way possible. You cried fake tears and expected to remain the family's precious, broken doll. But the script has been flipped. Now you're the one on the floor, and no one is coming to rescue you. Because a sad selfie doesn't erase the screenshots, the voice notes, or the years of testimonies from all the people you've hurt. Everyone finally sees you for who you are. The performance is over, Stella." She stood there, silent tears streaming down her face. My dad wouldn't look at me. "I am so tired of being the supporting actress in your drama," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I hadn't realized I was holding. "Well, the show's over. The stage is mine now, and my audience is on my side." I left without another word. Leo was waiting in the car with the radio on and a fresh coffee for me. "How did it go?" he asked gently. "It was liberating," I said, a real smile spreading across my face. "She finally understands that she has lost all control." He squeezed my hand. "You know, helping you get revenge has been surprisingly therapeutic." "Good," I said, taking a sip of coffee. "Because part 2 is about to begin." Part 2 was a campaign of quiet, public happiness. It started with the launch party for my friend Julian's new restaurant. He was a celebrated local chef, and the event was guaranteed to have media coverage. Stella, who thrived on a curated image of a life she didn't lead, would have killed for an invitation. She wasn't on the list. Leo and I were. We were stopped by photographers at the entrance, and the next day, a photo of us appeared on a prominent city blog with the caption, "The night's most stunning couple. Leo and his new love steal the show." Stella's response was a passive-aggressive story, a black and white photo of a book with the text, "Some people chase the spotlight, I prefer depth." The irony was breathtaking. A few weeks later was our cousin Chloe's wedding. Stella was a bridesmaid and had likely assumed Chloe would ask me not to bring Leo. Instead, Chloe called me. "Please bring him," she said. "Everyone knows what Stella did, and I am not playing her games at my own wedding. She needs to learn that her actions have consequences." At the reception, Stella was alone, poured into a dress that was too tight, her smile a brittle veneer. She pretended not to see us. Leo was the perfect partner, keeping me close, whispering jokes in my ear. All she could do was watch. The defining moment came during the first dance. Chloe subtly waved us onto the floor to dance near them. As Leo and I swayed to the music, Stella approached us, her mask of indifference finally cracking. "Leo, can we talk?" she asked, her voice trembling. He didn't even let go of me. He looked at her, his expression calm and unreadable. "No, I'm busy loving your sister." Mia froze. I took a deep breath and added, "And for the first time in a long time, I'm with someone who actually loves me back." "You wouldn't understand that? You've always confused obsession with love." She stumbled backward, tripping on her own gown. No one rushed to help, they just watched. The silence was more damning than any laughter could have been. She fled the reception hall moments later. I stayed on the dance floor, feeling lighter than I had in years. The final act came a month later, when I was asked to be featured in an online magazine about women reinventing their lives after betrayal. I never used her name, but I told the whole story. The narcissistic sister, the unfaithful fiancé, the calculated revenge, and the unexpected love that grew from it. The article went viral. I know Stella read it because she messaged me from a new account. "Do you have to air all our dirty laundry just to get attention?" I replied immediately. "This isn't dirty laundry. This is my story. You were the director of my life for years. Now, I'm the one writing the script, and I'm the star." She never wrote back. Friends told me she was becoming a recluse. The influencer partnerships she'd been cultivating dried up. Her carefully constructed facade had crumbled, and she had no one to blame but herself. And as for me, I kept living. Leo was no longer just a co-conspirator in my revenge plot. In the midst of the chaos, he had become my safe harbor. What started as a shared goal to teach my sister a lesson had quietly, unexpectedly, blossomed into something real and beautiful. What Stella had tried to destroy had only made me stronger. And she, who had built her entire identity around being desired, was now utterly alone. The moment I knew I was truly over, Mark happened on a perfectly ordinary morning. Leo was in my kitchen, making coffee, humming off-key to an old song on the radio. He'd been staying over most nights, his toothbrush now a permanent resident in my bathroom. As I watched him, I realized that the thought of Mark was no longer a wound, but a faint, faded scar. My relationship with Mark had been built on promises of a future. My relationship with Leo was built on the reality of the present. He was the one who showed up with soup when I was sick, the one who sat with me in silence when I was overwhelmed, the one who celebrated my smallest victories as if they were his own. One evening at a quiet dinner, he took my hand. "You know," he said softly, "I came into this to help you get even with your sister." But somewhere along the way, I stopped pretending. My heart skipped a beat. "I'm not pretending anymore either," I confessed. He smiled and raised his glass. "To revenge, then?" "No," I said, clinking my glass against his. "To what comes after." Months later, I received an unexpected call. It was Mark. After ignoring 2 calls, Leo gently prompted me, "You should answer. You deserve closure." We met at a coffee shop. He looked terrible, gaunt and exhausted. He apologized and then tried to explain. Stella had come to him when I was sick, feeding him a web of lies about my past, showing him doctored text messages to prove I was manipulative and vindictive. She had convinced him I was a monster, and that she was the one who had loved him all along. "None of that excuses what you did, Mark," I said calmly. "I know," he whispered, tears in his eyes. "I realized she had played me the second you walked out the door. I destroyed the best thing in my life for a lie." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Are you happy with him?" I smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile. Happier than I ever thought possible. I stood up and walked away, not with anger, but with the quiet certainty that his chapter in my life was truly over. It took longer to mend things with my family. My mother eventually called and, for the first time, gave me a sincere apology. "I always knew Stella was difficult," she admitted, her voice thick with regret. "I thought if I just protected her more, she would get better. I confused her being louder with her needing me more, and I let you down." My father came to my apartment a few weeks later. He was a man of few words, but his apology was profound. "I failed you," he said, his eyes filled with a sorrow I had never seen before. "I failed to protect you from her, and I failed to teach you both how to be sisters. I see the man you are with, and I see how happy he makes you. I am so proud of the woman you have become." They were the words I had needed to hear my entire life. I told Leo everything that night as we lay in bed. "How do you feel?" he asked, holding me close. "Free," I answered, and I was surprised by how true it felt. Truly free. "And Stella?" I thought for a moment. "I hope she finds peace somewhere far away from me. I hope she gets better. In the end, this journey was never just about getting revenge. It was about reclaiming my own story. It was about learning that I deserve to be cherished, protected, and loved for who I am. It was about realizing that to find the love of your life, you first have to stop accepting the bare minimum from people who will never value you. And now, waking up every morning next to Leo with his goofy Labrador snoring at our feet, I know that every battle was worth it. They brought me here. To him. To us. To peace. 2 years passed. The quiet, steady rhythm of my life with Leo became my new normal. The drama with Stella faded, not into forgiveness, but into a distant, quiet ache that I rarely felt the need to touch. We built a life together. We bought a house with a big yard for his Labrador, planted a garden we were both terrible at maintaining, and got engaged on a Tuesday night over a burnt pizza, laughing until we cried. It was a life that was profoundly, beautifully ordinary. The call came on a Sunday morning. It was my mother, her voice tight with the panic I hadn't heard in years. "It's your father," she said. "He's had a heart attack. We're at St. Mary's." The world tilted. Leo drove, one hand on the wheel, the other holding mine, a silent, solid presence as I stared unseeing at the passing scenery. The hospital was a blur of antiseptic smells and hushed voices. We found my mother in a sterile waiting room, looking smaller and more fragile than I had ever seen her. And sitting beside her, holding a cup of untouched coffee, was Stella. She looked different. Her hair was a natural color, pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore no makeup, and the frantic, attention-seeking energy that had always radiated from her was gone, replaced by a heavy stillness. When she saw me, her eyes widened for a moment with a flicker of the old fear, but she didn't look away. "Hey," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "How is he?" I asked, my question directed at my mother, but my eyes locked on my sister. "He's stable," Mom managed. "The doctors are optimistic. He's resting." An awkward, heavy silence fell between us. Leo introduced himself quietly to my mother, his calm presence a buffer in the tense room. My parents had met him several times, and they adored him, but this was the first time he and Stella had been in the same space since the day she'd watched us on the dance floor. She gave him a small, respectful nod and looked down at her hands. She made no attempt to engage him, to perform, to make the moment about her. She was just there. Over the next few days, we fell into a strange, unspoken truce. We took turns sitting with Dad, who was recovering slowly but surely. We brought Mom food. We managed the endless calls from concerned relatives. Stella was efficient, quiet, and unobtrusive. She never tried to talk to me about what had happened. She never forced an interaction. She simply coexisted in the space, her focus entirely on our father. One evening, I was leaving Dad's room as she was arriving to take over the night shift. We met in the quiet, dimly lit hallway. "You should go home and get some rest," she said softly. "You look exhausted." "So do you," I replied, my voice neutral. She gave a small, sad smile. "I probably deserve to." She hesitated, clutching the strap of her bag. "For what it's worth, Mel Leo seems like a really good man. I'm happy for you." It was the last thing I expected to hear. There was no barb, no hidden meaning. It was just a statement. I just nodded, unsure of what to say. Later that week, when Dad was finally cleared to go home, I was packing his things when Stella walked in. She closed the door gently behind her. "Can I talk to you for a second?" she asked. I steeled myself. "Okay." She stood across the room, as if she was afraid to get too close. "I've spent the last 2 years in therapy," she began, her voice steady. "A lot of therapy. And I've had to face a lot of ugly things about myself. The main one being that my tragic love story was a fantasy. One invented because I was terrified that I was fundamentally unlovable. And instead of dealing with that, I decided that if I couldn't be happy, no one else deserved to be either. Especially you." Tears started to well in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "What I did to you and Mark was unforgivable. It wasn't about him, and it wasn't about Leo. It was about you. You had everything I wanted. real love, stability, a life you had built for yourself. And I tried to burn it to the ground because I was a coward. There's no excuse for it. It was cruel, and it was monstrous. She finally looked me straight in the eye. I am so sorry, Melissa. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I needed you to hear me say it. I'm working on being better. Not for you, or for Mom and Dad, but for myself. I hope one day, that's enough. I stood there, silent, the neatly folded hospital blanket in my hands. It was the apology I had long ago decided I would never get. It was real. It was accountable. It held none of the manipulative theatrics of the old Stella. Why are you telling me this now? I finally asked. Because seeing Dad in that bed, it made me realize that life is too short to be the villain in your own story. I'm done with that role. I looked at this new version of my sister, subdued, humbled, and seemingly, finally, honest. The rage that had once powered me was long gone, replaced by a quiet peace she could no longer touch. But in its place, I felt a flicker of something new. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It was smaller, more fragile. It was possibility. Thank you for saying that, Stella, I said, my voice even. I appreciate the honesty. It wasn't an absolution, and she didn't treat it as one. She just nodded, a wave of relief washing over her face. Okay, she whispered. I'll let you finish up. She left the room. I stood there for a long moment, then I finished packing my father's bag. When I walked out into the hallway, Leo was waiting for me. He saw the look on my face and simply wrapped his arms around me. Are you okay? He asked. Yeah, I said, leaning into him, feeling the solid strength of his embrace. I think I am. Our relationship with Stella didn't magically heal overnight. There were no tearful reunions or promises to be best friends again. But it was a start. It was a single, sturdy brick laid as a foundation for something new. Something that was no longer built on lies and jealousy, but on the quiet, difficult ground of truth. Revenge had given me justice. Time had given me peace. But it was facing the ghosts of the past, together, that finally gave my family, and me, a chance to truly heal. The year after my father's health scare was one of quiet recalibration. There were no grand family therapy sessions or dramatic reconciliations. Instead, there was a slow, deliberate effort from everyone to build something new. My parents started treating me not as the resilient, self-sufficient daughter, but simply as their daughter. They called just to talk. They remembered small details about my work. They made space for me. Stella and I communicated sparingly at first, through a family group chat my mother insisted on creating. It was mostly logistical, coordinating visits with Dad, planning for holidays. But slowly, tentatively, it evolved. She'd send a picture of a dog she saw that reminded her of mine. I'd send a link to an article, one thought she'd find interesting. They were small, fragile bridges built over a chasm of past hurts. She never once tried to overstep. She never asked for more than I was willing to give. She was just consistent. The new Stella was quiet, thoughtful, and seemed to find more value in listening than in being heard. When Leo and I set a date for our wedding, the question of Stella's involvement loomed. My friends were wary. Are you sure? They'd ask, their protectiveness a familiar comfort. I am, I told them, and I was surprised by how much I meant it. I didn't ask her to be a bridesmaid. That felt like a step too far, a pretense that the deep scars of our past didn't exist. I simply sent her an invitation, just like any other guest. She called me after she received it, her voice thick with emotion. Are you sure? She asked, echoing my friends. I am, I said. I want you there. Okay, she whispered. I'll be there, in the back. I won't cause any trouble, I promise. I know you won't, I said. And I did. Our wedding day was the complete opposite of the one I had planned with Mark. It was on a sunny afternoon in a beautiful botanical garden. It was filled with light, laughter, and an overwhelming sense of peace. My father, his health much improved, walked me down the aisle, his hand squeezing mine with a strength that said everything his words couldn't. I saw Stella sitting with our cousins. She was wearing a simple, elegant blue dress. She looked beautiful, but more than that, she looked serene. As I passed her row, she met my eyes and gave me a small, watery smile that was full of a genuine, unselfish happiness for me. In that moment, I felt the last, tight knot of resentment in my chest finally unravel. Later, during the reception, a minor crisis erupted when the clasp on my grandmother's antique necklace, my something borrowed, broke. I was in a side room, panicking slightly, when Stella appeared at the door. "Mom said you needed help," she said softly. "I used to be pretty good at fixing these things, remember?" She took the delicate chain from my hands. Her fingers were steady and sure as she worked the tiny pieces of metal. She didn't talk about the past. She didn't make a grand speech. She just focused on the task, her presence calm and grounding. "There," she said after a minute, fastening the repaired clasp around my neck. "Good as new." She looked at my reflection in the mirror, her eyes meeting mine. "You look beautiful, Mel, truly." "Thank you, Stella," I said, my voice softer than I intended, "for everything." She understood I wasn't just talking about the necklace. She simply nodded, squeezed my shoulder gently, and slipped back out to the party, leaving me to my moment. The rest of the night was a joyful blur. I danced with my husband, my father, and my friends. I felt surrounded by a love that was real and unconditional. I was no longer a woman defined by betrayal or a quest for revenge. I was just a bride, blissfully happy on her wedding day. 2 years later, we brought our daughter, Clara, home from the hospital. Our house, once just ours, was now filled with the chaotic, wonderful energy of a new life. My parents were doting grandparents, and Stella became the best aunt I could have ever imagined. She came over not with grand, expensive gifts, but with coffee for me and a willingness to hold a crying baby for hours so I could take a shower. She read Clara's stories, her voice soft and animated. She never offered unsolicited advice or competed for attention. She was just present, a quiet, loving fixture in our daughter's life. One afternoon, I came downstairs to find Stella sitting on the floor, patiently helping a 1-year-old Clara stack blocks. The sun streamed through the window, illuminating the scene in a warm glow. Clara babbled happily, and Stella listened with the focus and delight of someone who was exactly where she wanted to be. She looked up and saw me watching. She smiled, a real, unguarded smile that reached her eyes. It was the smile I remembered from our childhood, before the world had twisted us into rivals. In that quiet, ordinary moment, I realized the story was finally complete. The war was over. The revenge was a distant memory, a catalyst that had inadvertently led to all of this. It had shattered our family, but in doing so, it had given us the chance to rebuild it from the ground up, with stronger, more honest materials. My sister had tried to destroy my happiness because she couldn't find her own. My revenge was not just in taking the object of her fantasy, but in building a life so full of real, tangible joy that her fantasy world simply crumbled to dust in comparison. She had to learn to live in the real world, and as it turned out, the real world suited her far better. My revenge gave me my life back, but it was love, Leo's, my family's, and finally, my own for myself, that taught me how to live it. And that was a victory greater than I could have ever planned.